Awesome, awesome. Well, good morning, CLA. It's still weird to have you guys actually in this building. I feel like for such a long time, we were separated and we were apart, but it's so good to have you guys back, and it's so nice to worship together again. It's just, like Pastor Rob said, it's just such a nice feeling of worship and being together again. Like Pastor Rob said, I am one half of the young adults pastor team. My other better half is in Maple Ridge, and he stole my joke. I was going to say that we're trying to take over the church. There's two of us. We just need a third to go to Souk and be there and take over completely. But Bryce and I, we have been a part of the young adult community for the past year, being the pastors of this community, and it's been just such a good time. A weird time to join the pastoral staff because we couldn't do anything in person, but nonetheless, we've done the best we could with it. We've made the most of a bad situation, and despite all of that, we've had great moments of great joy with our team and with our young adult community. And as many of you probably don't know me because we are relatively new, I thought I'd give you a little bit of info about me. I grew up in Terrace, BC, northern BC. I grew up in a Christian family. I had awesome parents. We struggled a little bit here and there, but what family doesn't? As I got older, I rededicated my life to Jesus, and I really felt like pastoring was the call on my life. And so I went to Bible college, and that is where I met Bryce, my husband. We dated for a few years, and as soon as we graduated, we got married, and actually we just hit our 5-year anniversary on Friday. So it is it's a big deal. It's a big deal. We went to the WAG in White Rock, and great views there. It is a friend's suggestion, and so we are happy that we got to ring in the 5th year anniversary here with you guys in Langley. We wanted to go to Hawaii this year. That was our goal. That's where we did our honeymoon. But obviously, COVID kind of shut that down pretty quickly. So maybe in the future, that is something we will do. Right when we finished school, after we got married, we pastored for a little bit in Coquitlam at CLA Coquitlam, back when that was a thing. We helped transition it to an autonomous church. It became Resonate Church, and we helped with that process. After that, we felt called to Kamloops, and we had some of our greatest joys there in ministry, as well as some of our greatest heartbreaks. And we found ourselves a little bit broken after that season, and so we came here back to CLA. Bryce got a job just as the graphic designer, and somehow we wormed our way into the pastoral staff and are now taking over the church. So this is our goal, I guess. It's something that we both love to do, and we are happy about it. Bryce and I both have quite a few hobbies. Bryce, you could say, has like the more extravagant hobbies. He likes to think himself as not bougie, but he really is bougie. His hobbies are all very, very pricey. He loves hockey. This is probably his top priority, his main thing in his life. Any hockey fans out there? Like 2 maybe. He loves hockey. The Canucks are his people, but he's actually thinking about jumping ship to the Kraken. You guys can sacrifice him later, but so he loves hockey. He loves watching it. He plays goalie, which is the most expensive of the positions to play, with all the pads and the helmet and everything. It's so expensive. We went to the store the other day, and some guy was trying to sell him on $2,000 leg pads, and I was like, babe, we are pastors. We cannot afford that. And so he's like, oh, but come on, babe, you could just make it work. And I was like, no. I'm the one who does the budget, so I'm always shutting him down. And then on top of playing and watching and loving to participate in hockey, he also likes collecting jerseys. This is his thing. So he has 18 out of 32. He's over halfway, and they just sit in our closet, and he wears them all the time. And when we're walking our dog, he always has a different one on. It's not always the Canucks. He has an Avalanche jersey, or let's see, what other teams are there? Oh, he doesn't have the Winnipeg Jets. He has, I don't even know if he has a Pittsburgh one. He has the Flyers, and so he'll wear them, and people walking with us or around us will always ridicule him because he's not wearing the Canucks jersey. He's always wearing something else. He just likes the design, and so he loves hockey. He loves sports, and on top of his love for hockey, he also likes techie things. He plays guitar and drums, and he likes camera gear and audio gear, and so his expenses are pretty high. Now, me, on the other hand, my hobby is smaller and much more attainable. I enjoy creating things. I like painting. I enjoy looking at pretty things. And so for me, I'm stationery is a 10 out of 10. I could go peruse Staples for hours and just be in my prime. I could go to Michael's and just walk the aisles and just love my life. And so my hobby's a little bit less expensive. And I've always had an affinity for creating things and wanting to make things look pretty. And I can put some paint on a canvas and call it a day. I wouldn't say I'm an artist, but I enjoy it. And it's always been like this. Ever since I've been little, my mom tells me this story that at one point in my life, I would sit and have all my crayons in front of me when I was like 4 years old. And I would put them in order from red to purple and have the black and the white in a separate pile. And I would just like looking at them in specific order. And that's all I would do. I would be so precise about how they looked, and then I wouldn't do anything further. I wouldn't even get time to actually color or create something because I was so particular about how it looked. And as I got older and as we went to school and we started buying cool things for like the school year, I would get like the 50 set of pencil crayons. All my friends would get like the 12, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, you peasants. I got the 50. I am the best. I love this. And they were like my prize joy. And my friends would use their coloring, and they would like really just dig in there. They would color outside the lines, and I was very particular. I wanted it to look so nice, and these pencil crayons, this 50 set, was my pride and joy. And I remember this one time when I was in grade 2, and we were doing this like coloring project, and I actually had separate pencil crayons that I used because I didn't want to wreck my 50 set. I had like the pencil crayons from the previous year that I brought, like a few colors I had left, and I'm not touching this 50 set. I want them to look perfect, and I love them so much, and I'm just not going to touch them. And so I took this 50 set and I put it aside, and I started coloring with my other ones. And a girl in my class came up to me and she said, hey, Rachelle, like, could I borrow your black pencil crayon? Now, if you know anything about primary school or elementary school, you know that black pencil crayons are like gold. Like these things, they are gone the instant you walk into class. They are gone. People have used them and have sharpened them so much that they are little stubs. And so I was like, maybe. And after considering it for a little bit, I said, "Oh, okay, Amy, you can use my black pencil crayon, but if you use it and you need to sharpen it, you have to ask me first." Like what kid at 7 years old is like, "No, you have to ask me to sharpen my own pencil crayon." I was so protective, so controlling, and so particular about my pencil crayons. And it makes a little bit of sense when you know how much I love these pencil crayons. It makes sense when you know how important school supplies was to me at this time. They were honestly my most prized possession. I didn't want to use them. I would prefer to use my other pencil crayons or my markers or my crayons, anything else but this 50 set. And I had unintentionally set aside this 50 set pencil crayon apart from my other supplies. I held them with higher regard. I had a specific purpose in mind for them, and I didn't want them to get wrecked. Now, there are many things in our lives that we deem as precious, maybe unnecessarily so. Maybe for you, it's a room in your house, like a fancy dining room that your kids aren't allowed to play in because they're going to wreck it. My grandparents had a plastic over the couch type situation, and so even when I was in there, you couldn't move the plastic. You had to sit on top of the plastic. This couch was, I don't know what it was made of, gold or something, but it was so special to them. Maybe for you, it's your fine china. Maybe you have it in a cupboard somewhere that it's just sitting there and just waiting to be used, but you don't want to use it unless somebody really special comes over, maybe the queen. And you have it sitting there, and it's just waiting to be used, but it's meant for a specific purpose. It has a specific job waiting for it. Maybe for you, it's something special that somebody gave you, somebody that has passed on, or just something really important that you just say, nobody else can touch this. I don't want anybody else to use this. This is my special thing. See, these are things that we have set aside for a specific time and a specific purpose and a specific use. They have been sanctified, in a sense, set apart from the common, the ordinary, and the regular things of life. They are unique to us. They are deemed, in a sense, sacred. And this sanctity is what we're talking about today. Not the sanctity of a room or of your china or of that precious item that you have in your house, but the actual sanctity of us as people. We have been going through a series on the names of God. It has been a great series. I've enjoyed it so far. We have been talking about the different Old Testament names, starting with Jehovah, the Lord. And so we have talked about Jehovah Ra, Jehovah Nisi, Jehovah Rapha, sorry. I picked like the easy ones to say and I still messed it up. We talked about the Lord is my shepherd, the Lord my banner, the Lord my healer, to name a few. And we're continuing on with, ready for it, Jehovah Mekoddishkem. I don't know if I said that right. It's a hard one to pronounce. It's like 12 letters long. I was like, of course, Pastor Derrick decided that I need to preach this one. And so I practiced the name probably 50 times, hoping I got it right. And you know what? My Hebrew professor in Bible college still would be disappointed. But it's okay. I'm moving past it. This word, Jehovah Mekoddishkem, means the Lord sanctifies, or the Lord who sets you apart. Now, sanctification is a common topic in the Bible. It's not just found in the Old Testament, it's found everywhere. So God is clearly stating the importance of being sanctified and the necessary steps to get there. But this name, along with Jehovah, is only found actually twice in the Bible. The first mention of the verse is Exodus 31:13. It says, "You are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all you shall keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you." Then in Leviticus 20:7 and 8, it says, "You shall consecrate yourself, therefore, and be holy, because I am holy. Keep my statutes and do them. I am the Lord who sanctifies you." Now, if you are newer to church or just need a quick refresher, in simple terms, sanctification means to be set apart. It means to be holy. It means to be separate. It's a verb, and it requires action. And so God is the one who sanctifies us, and it happens in a single moment. In Hebrews 10:10, it says that we were sanctified once through Jesus' body and his blood through his offering. But it also is a continual action that we as Christians today need to step into to become more like Christ and to walk like Jesus in holiness every single day. So the very first time that we see God sanctifying something in Scripture isn't actually when he's talking to the Israelites. It's actually on the seventh day at the end of a creation story. He has just completed the world. He has put everything together in a perfect way. He has said it is good. But then on the seventh day, he rested and he set it apart and he sanctified this day. Now, it wasn't that the other 6 days weren't as good. It was just that the seventh day had a specific purpose. It had something intentional about it that was meant to create a space of rest. So the instructions were for the Israelites was to also keep this Sabbath, a seventh day, a day where they could rest, where God could restore his relationship with a fallen human race. A moment where the Israelites, if they could follow the instructions properly, could restore a completion of a relationship between them and God. You know, Sabbath wasn't created just to sleep or to rest, but also for the Israelites to just pause and reflect on the character of God. The purpose of the Sabbath was to remind them that the Lord ultimately was the one who granted them holiness. It wasn't their deeds, it wasn't what they could do, but actually the Lord who granted them this. No one else in the world could look at them and see their flaws and say, "You are still holy." These Sabbath days were special. They forged a bond between God and the Israelites. And that while today our Sabbath may look a little bit different, it doesn't require animal sacrifice, Sabbath is still incredibly important for our walk with God. We are still called to rest and to take time aside and say, "Jesus, I'm going to reflect on who you are, on your character, and who you have called me to be, and I'm going to spend time intentionally with you." And so if we want to, as Christians, be fulfilled in our life, we have to prioritize Sabbath. I think we can easily forget about it. We can easily get so bogged down with our schedules that are so busy, and we can just flick on Netflix instead of intentionally spending time with God. And this can just happen so naturally, but if we want to live in our full potential and the calling that God has called us to, we have to Sabbath well, and we have to rest properly. So if you want to be the most intentional and fruitful in your walk with God, keep your Sabbath. Set it apart from the rest of your week. Try to do as little work as possible. Spend time with family, with friends, and reflect on who God is. Keep him at the core of your life. So to take a day out of your week to rest and to spend time with God and reflect on your holiness is key to the Sabbath. And so this is one part of the equation of being sanctified. The second part is actually living a life that is set apart. Again, in Leviticus 20, it says, "You shall consecrate yourself, therefore, and be holy because I am holy. Keep my statutes and do them. I am the Lord who sanctifies you." See, God set apart the seventh day. He made the day holy, and he sanctified this day, but he also called the Israelites to do the same. They were God's chosen people, and their calling was to be unique in a culture that served many gods, that said sexual immorality was A-okay and that anything would go, in a culture that believed that child sacrifice was the way to make gods happy. Their calling in the midst of this culture was to be different, was to be set apart and to stick out like a sore thumb. And it's not an easy task. If you're familiar with the Old Testament, the Israelites failed at this over and over and over again. They fell short of this calling 90% of the time. They allowed their disobedience to come in and to cloud their judgment, and their arrogance distracted them from their purpose. They had to choose over and over again between God and the world. They had to choose between God or societal norms. They had to choose between God or anything else. Leviticus 20, 22 to 24, and then 26 says this. It says, "You shall therefore keep all my statutes and all my rules and do them, that the land where I bring you may not vomit you out, and you shall not walk in the customs of the nations that I am driving out before you. For they did all these things, and therefore I detested them. But I have said to you, you shall inherit the land. I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God who has separated you from your peoples." And then in 26 it says, "You shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and I have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine." See, the promise was for the Israelites to have an abundant and rich land, but they needed to keep the Lord's statutes. They needed to keep the rules and the things that God had put before them in order to see this promise fulfilled. See, God had given them specific instructions to Moses, and if they disobeyed this, then the land would literally vomit them out, and they would be removed completely from this land. The protection that God had promised them was only to be upheld if the peoples separated themselves, if they set themselves apart, if they made themselves holy before God. When they were able to be holy, it is in this moment that God said, "I will make the promises and the path that I have set before you clear." Our calling is the same. While we don't live as the Old Testament believers do, our calling is still to be holy. And if you are a Christ follower today, whether you've been a Christian for a day or a year or years, your calling is still to be set apart. It's something that we continually grow in and need to work at. Like the Israelites in society today, we are constantly being assaulted by pressure to live up to societal norms. We may not have child sacrifice knocking at our door, but we do have our variety of things that we have to be different. More than ever, our religion and our relationship with God causes people around us to be a little bit nervous, to be a little scared of what's going to happen. And we have the pressure not to conform our God to make everyone else in the masses feel comfortable. You know, I get nervous when I post things online, more so now than ever. I take moments every time I post something. Will this offend anybody? Am I going to hurt somebody's feelings if I post this? And I have to sit and I have to think, and if it's yes, I have to ask myself, is it important for them maybe to be offended? If I don't post this, am I not living the truth that is in the Bible? And I have to take these moments and I have to really think about it because I don't want to offend anybody unnecessarily, but I also have to speak the truth that I find in the Bible and the truth that I know that comes from God. And it's a challenge every single day because it doesn't mean I make a ton of friends. It means that sometimes I'm a little bit pushed to the back burner, I'm a little ostracized, and I don't want to have people dislike me. A few weeks ago, Bryce was getting his hair cut. He booked with a random person. Usually he goes to the same person every single time, but his hairdresser has moved away, and so he was looking for a new person. So he booked a random guy at Chatters. And so he's sitting in the chair, and they're having like the typical hairdresser conversation, like the get to know you, whatever. And so they're chatting about their job, and Bryce is asking how long this guy has been a hairdresser, and they're chatting about what brought them to Langley. And eventually the conversation comes around, and the guy asks Bryce, "So what do you do?" And Bryce is like, "Well, I do graphic design, and I'm also a pastor." And instantly, in that moment, the guy shut down. What was a fruitful conversation that felt very friendly turned out to just be shut down, and the guy no longer wanted to have anything to do with Bryce. They finished their haircut in silence, and Bryce paid and left. And Bryce has no idea why, if the guy has a problem with Christianity or just with the church in general, but this is what our society is facing today. People don't like Christians. People don't like the church. They don't like what we stand for. And as a result, we have to stand up and sometimes be the people that people don't like. It requires a major sacrifice to our will. It requires a major sacrifice when it gets a little bit awkward, when we get nervous, and maybe even when life gets a little threatened. We live in a pretty comfortable society, but maybe one day, God willing, maybe not, but maybe one day, it may be life-threatening to believe what we believe. And let's remember, when it does get this awkward, when it does get uncomfortable, the ultimate price that Jesus paid for us to have access to God. When it gets uncomfortable, when it would be easier just to say, you know what, I'll just push my beliefs on the back burner. I don't want to offend anybody. Let's still say Jesus paid it all, and I can be true to him. When we sacrifice our will and our desires, we truly become sanctified. The easiest way for this sanctification to happen is by relinquishing total and complete control. And when we say, God, you can have my life, you can have these moments, please make me more holy, make me look more like you, he makes us holy. It's comical. Bryce and I have been watching the Olympics here and there. We watch really just to support. We're not huge sport people. Like Bryce plays hockey. I really don't work out. It's a problem. Somebody called me out on it last week. I'm getting over it. So we turn on the TV, and we've been watching it here and there. And the other day we were watching diving. We don't know anything about diving, and after watching for a few minutes, we were sitting on our couch, and we began to pick up on what was good and what was bad. And so we were sitting there, and we're watching these divers do their best, and they're jumping off these diving boards, doing like a bunch of spins and landing in the water. And every single time we had something to say, we were like, oh, that's too big of a splash. That's not good. Or oh, they should have tucked in a little tighter. They really just were like all loosey-goosey there. They really need to fix that. Or they needed to point their toes better because they just looked like they just didn't know what they were doing. And we're sitting there and we're criticizing all these like Olympic athletes, and we're sitting on our couch and there is junk food everywhere. And we are having the audacity to say, oh my goodness, these people just don't know what they're doing. And it's easy in our lives to be a little bit lazy like this. It's easy to criticize and to see what people are doing and say, oh, I could do it better, or I won't even say that. I definitely couldn't do it better, but it's easy to say, oh, they could do better. And sometimes our relationship with Jesus can become a little bit like a spectator sport instead of participating in the hard work of training to be more like him. And so instead of being involved in our faith, in walking with God every single day and walking with Jesus, and thinking about services, we can easily switch into this spectator sport mentality. We can easily sit back and just say, oh, I could do better. They didn't do that service good enough. They had too many lights. They had, the preacher was average, whatever it may be. And it's easy to kind of take a backstage to our own faith. See, in North America culture, it's easy to sit on the sidelines. And instead of becoming more like Jesus, we criticize. We like the idea of Jesus. We like the idea of being saved, but only when it's convenient to us. When we are required to give up on certain things, we prefer the safety of the sidelines over the action in the field. See, each Olympian out there when they're competing leaves it all out there. You see them after their race or their swimming competition or whatever it is, and you know that they are exhausted, both physically, mentally, emotionally. They are spent. So the question for us then is, how often do we leave it out there like they do? I would say that our relationship with God and our relationship with Jesus is far more important than an Olympic sport. And the Olympians go out there and they give it 110%, but we come to church and we sit here, and this is sometimes just the extent of our Christianity. Are we willing to leave 110% out on the field with Jesus? Our holiness is slowly refined as we become more like him. As we mimic and as we follow his instructions, we become more like Jesus. And as we become more like him, we are become more sanctified. We are called to be sanctified. We are called to be holy, for I am holy. So as believers, we need to take the necessary steps to becoming more like him. One last time, let's read Leviticus 20. It says, "You shall consecrate yourself, therefore. Be holy, because I am holy. Keep my statutes and do them. I am the Lord who sanctifies you." The last important part of the puzzle to being sanctified is the commitment of consecrating ourselves before the Lord. Jehovah Mekoddishkem, the Lord who sanctifies us, the Lord who makes us holy. This holiness only comes after we fully consecrate ourselves to God. Consecration is a decision we have to make. It's the choice of saying, God, I give you all that I am. It's here that God does the sanctifying work. See, God responds to our decision of consecration with sanctification because God does not force us into anything that we don't want to do. He doesn't force us to be sanctified. He says you have a choice. And that consecration is what we need in order for ourselves to be fully sanctified. In Romans 12, Paul urges us as believers to offer ourselves up as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This sacrifice, putting ourselves on the altar, requires all of us, not a portion. When the priest would come in the Old Testament and would sacrifice a lamb, they wouldn't leave off the legs or the arms or the head. The whole thing would be put on the altar as a sacrifice to God. The ask is that we present ourselves the same way. The ask is that we give our whole selves to God. Giving every part of ourselves means our time, our talents, our resources, our finances, everything that we hold so close to ourselves. God is asking for all of it. Everything that we hold so close, when we give that to God, that means that he knows that we are serious about sanctification. In the Bible, we see the story of Abraham and Isaac, and Abraham is asked to sacrifice his son. Could you imagine that? Such a strong request. A bold act of sacrifice would have been required if God had said no. But Abraham was willing. Abraham went to the altar and was willing to sacrifice his son in order to be right with God. And this bold action consecrated himself. It showed God that Abraham was willing to go the distance for him, to be holy, to be separated, to be with God 110%. And many times in the Bible, this bold act of sacrifice is required before God does something big for his people. This sacrifice was proof that was needed to show their consecration and commitment to him. Maybe for you today, this permission and this dedication is what you need in your life in order for God to work in a big way. Maybe you've been holding on a little too tight to the world and the things that the world says is important, that you've kind of just missed completely and totally what God is thinking and what he wants you to do. See, God offers all that we need in order to live a holy and an abundant and a satisfied life. But this abundance and this holiness sometimes just doesn't mean what we want it to mean. This abundance sometimes doesn't mean financial gain or doesn't mean a big house or a healthy family. Sometimes this abundance means just being in a really close, intimate relationship with God. As we adjust ourselves and as we become more like Christ, God's priorities become our priorities. We move from being self-centered to being spirit-centered, and we actually begin to look more holy. See, we aren't called just to live a saved life, but a holy life. We received salvation through justification. In an instant, we were saved, and God said, "You are right with me." But we have gained access to heaven once we die on this earth. But with sanctification, we have the privilege and the ability to see heaven here on earth. If we are truly sanctified, if we consecrate ourselves to God and say, "Jesus, you can have my life," we can see heaven here on earth in glimpses. We don't have to wait for when we die. We can see Jesus here and now, and we can see heaven on earth. I read a quote this week. It says, "Until you consecrate yourself to him, Jehovah Mekoddishkem will just remain a name to you, difficult to pronounce and even more difficult to experience." See, consecration is at the core of our sanctification. Giving ourselves to God is at the core of who we are supposed to be. The goal and the hope is that we can experience the Lord who sanctifies. It's not unattainable, but it can be a little bit challenging sometimes. And that's our calling, to walk in line with Jesus. Heavenly Father, we commit ourselves to you. God, consecration is not always an easy thing, the choice to fully give ourselves up to you. But God, it's so worth it. And so God, today, if we have things in our lives that we need you to move in, God, would you just make a way? God, would you allow us to become more holy, and would you put that fire in us for us to be more like you? Jesus, we love you. In your name.